I need to know. It's okay. I want to know the truth, okay?
I can tell you.
Okay.
This was the moment when a mother realized her son was a wanted killer who had brutally taken the life of 21-year-old Jonia Berry.
I noticed you finally had a knife. I kept stabbing and stabbing. I remember trying to defend myself like this with my hands, and that's where I got the cuts on my hands.
He stabbed her so many times. This wasn't a person who was just trying to get one stab in and run away and grab a car.
This was the most horrific thing I've seen. It's something that I'll never forget.
I've heard so many people's lives.
Knox County 911.
Yes, Mr. White, remember at Cedar Bluff Road?
Mm-hmm.
There's a man that just walked in the store. He's heavily bloodied. Looks like he's been in a fight.
Does he need an ambulance?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Okay, can I talk to him, please?
Sure, he wants to talk.
All right, what's your name?
Jason Amami.
Jason?
Amami.
Now what happened?
I just felt somebody stab me right in my chest.
Somebody stabbed you?
Me in my face. And that's the first thing I did was get up and run. His roommate's still in there. Apparently somebody broke into his house.
Is his roommate okay?
He doesn't know. Is he okay? He was screaming very loud.
Now, where's your address at?
Redora Road.
Redora?
R-H-O-D-O-R-A.
R-H-O?
Park Apartment.
This 911 call came from a store clerk just minutes after 22-year-old Jason Amami ran in, barefoot and bleeding. He had a stab wound on his face, his hands were cut up, and blood was soaking through his shirt. But he wasn't just asking for help for himself. He said his roommate was still inside with the attacker. Knox County Sheriff's Department responded immediately and arrived at the apartment complex on Rodora Drive.
When the call came out, we then went to the apartment complex to check on the girl and kind of see what we could find there.
When the police entered the building, they found Jonia Berry lying face down near the front door. She'd been stabbed many times, with over 25 wounds covering her neck, chest, and arms. She was still alive, but barely hanging on.
She made some noises, but she never said anything. She never came out with any words. I'm thinking, how could one human being do this to another human being?
The amount of blood in the building told its own story, a grim reminder of how urgent her condition was. Soon the ambulance arrived, and they carefully lifted her onto the stretcher, rushing her to the hospital. Jason had been stabbed too and was taken to the hospital for treatment. Jonia was rushed away in a separate ambulance, but she never made it. Jonia died in the back of the ambulance, just minutes away from the hospital. Her body was taken for an autopsy. Before police arrived at the scene, another 911 call came in. A neighbor had heard banging on his door and yelling outside his apartment. He thought someone might be trying to break in.
Knox County 911.
Yeah, I hear a lot of noise outside my apartment. There was a lot of banging on the door right downstairs. Now I hear some sort of yelling.
Mm-hmm.
It's going out.
Do you see anybody outside?
I look out the people. Yep.
What's your name? Just hung up on me.
When the detectives talked to him, they tried to get as much information as they could, but he didn't have much to share. He said he hadn't seen anything. What he didn't know was that Jonia had collapsed just outside his apartment, out of sight, near the bottom of the door.
It's hard to imagine that somebody couldn't hear somebody knocking on the door, but of course she's bleeding out, so I don't know how much she could really pound on somebody's door.
Meanwhile, a team of detectives was at the crime scene, combing through the apartment inch by inch.
How bloody was this crime scene?
There was blood in not only in Jonna's bedroom, Jason's bedroom, blood in the living room, blood on the back door, blood out the back of the apartment going down the stairs. Looked like there had been some type of fight in Jonna's bedroom.
As investigators moved through the apartment, following the blood trail from room to room, they started piecing together how brutal the night must have been. In the middle of it all, they found something else.
Inside Jason Amami's bedroom, investigators recovered a piece of cardboard that had a partial shoe print on it.
The Atlanta Braves hat, the CD case, all of those things were leading us to believe that someone else possibly had entered the apartment, since these things did not belong to either one of the occupants of the apartment.
The murder weapon was discovered in the hallway directly outside of Jonna's bedroom. What stood out to me the most about the weapon is how damaged it was. The handle was broken, the blade was bent. I could only assume that it had hit bone that it was used multiple times, that it was very violent just given the force to break the handle.
The knife and blood samples from the crime scene were carefully collected for investigation. A bloody footprint was also found on a piece of cardboard lying near the door. The knife was sent to the lab for testing. Blood samples were submitted as well. However, due to a technical glitch, the DNA results were delayed. All anyone could do now was wait. With the crime scene processed and the evidence collected, the next step was understanding exactly what had been done to Jonia and Jason. That answer came from the medical examiner when the autopsy results came in. But it wasn't just Jonia who had suffered. The report also detailed Jason's injuries, deep wounds, defensive marks, and signs that he too had been violently attacked. He had fought to survive.
Jason naming me was just trying to survive, and I would think that most people would want to get away from whatever's happening to them. But we also wondered, why did the attacker let him get away? How did she not get away if he was able to get away? That raises a red flag, that Jason was able to get away. Plus, there was no forced entry into the apartment.
With Jason still in the hospital, unable to explain what happened that night, the detectives turned to Jonia's family for answers. What they heard surprised them.
Jason was stabbed also, but Jonah's brothers and her dad wondered why Jason didn't help her.
Jonia's brother and father couldn't shake the feeling that something just wasn't right from the beginning. They had doubts about Jason, who had been there that night in the very apartment where it all happened. Someone they thought would have protected her, or at the very least, tried harder to save her. And slowly, detectives started to see what the family was seeing.
I have a lot of suspicion about Jason Amamy. In my mind, he's a suspect, and so we have to talk to him.
And then came something even more unsettling. The knife used to kill Jonia hadn't been brought in by the killer. It came from her own kitchen right there inside the apartment.
We knew right away that the knife came from inside the home. It was part of a matching set that was from the kitchen.
That detail changed the tone of the entire investigation, because now it no longer looked like a random intruder had made their way in. It looked like someone who already knew the space, who moved through it with ease, who didn't need to break in because they already belonged there. And just like that, Jason Amamy wasn't just the roommate anymore. He was someone the detectives had to start looking at very, very carefully. By this time, Jason's health had improved enough for investigators to bring him in for an interview. The first question they asked was about his relationship with Jonia.
A couple things I wanted to go over with you about the two of you. So as far as you and John are concerned, has there ever been chemistry between the two of you?
I've always thought of John as a friend. I've never thought of dating her at all.
He said that they were just roommates.
How long have you known her?
I've known her for probably at least over 5 years.
Okay. Did you guys ever date?
No.
Never?
No. I was living in Knoxville and she needed a place to stay, so I said I'd be happy to let you live with me. That wouldn't be a problem.
Jason walked investigators through the events leading up to the crime that night.
She probably went to sleep about 10:30. I probably went to sleep 12:30 around there.
What do you remember after that?
I just remember waking up, hearing screams. I looked at my alarm clock. I believe all I remember seeing at 4, so probably 4 a.m. sometime.
But he soon explained why it didn't seem unusual at the time.
She told me when she first moved in, she said, if I wake up and I'm scared or something, just come in and check on me, make sure I'm okay.
Things took a chilling turn when Jason went to check on Jonia and saw a shadowy figure backing out of her bedroom.
He's on top of me. I just remember fighting with him. He punched me in my face. I kept telling him, I was like, what do you want? He just kept telling me, shut up, shut up. And then I felt a sharp pain right here, and that's when I knew he had a knife.
A violent struggle broke out between Jason and the unknown suspect.
As soon as I was able to do anything, he grabbed me and threw me down in my bed. And I was doing whatever I could to get out of the way of the knife. And there's one time I grabbed it and I felt this serrated part cut through my fingers. And next thing I know is I had a clear shot to my bedroom door and I just went as fast as I could.
Investigators kept questioning him to piece together what really happened that night.
You ran out of the apartment. Did you take anything with you?
I didn't even think about it.
What were you wearing?
I was wearing blue workout shorts, which I wore to the gym, and a pair of boxers.
Okay.
And that's all I was wearing. I just ran straight out the door and right across the street. And I was banging on some of the doors at the other complex.
At last, they asked the most crucial question. Jason had seen Jonia's killer up close. Did he remember what he looked like?
Let's just go through what this guy looks like.
He's got short hair, kind of like mine. It's like a brownish blonde color.
Jason not only described the suspect, but also agreed to offer details for a composite sketch.
Tom's going to help you with the composite.
Using Jason's description, police created a photorealistic computer composite of the suspect. The sketch was widely circulated, hoping someone would recognize him, but the police hadn't ruled out Jason. Something about his story just didn't sit right.
They weren't the kinds of wounds that Jonna had sustained, specifically a deep incised wound on his right ring finger. That was suspicious in nature.
Did he stab Jonna and his finger slide down the knife and cut his finger? Or was it an actual defensive wound that he sustained during the fight?
That was a problem for me in terms of who could have done this.
Also, the murder weapon was taken from their house, so Jason obviously had access to it. Based on this and other evidence, police decided to take Jason back to the crime scene on December 9th to see if his story held up.
The door was locked. Jonna was sitting right here. My door was totally closed to my room. I woke up just from my sleep here, and I remember walking this way.
Jason's account of the crime scene was consistent with his earlier statements during interrogation.
I'm still looking down, and I remember doing this and having him face me and grab me like this. And then he pushed me back this way, and I fell on the bed like this. And that's at the point to where I noticed he finally had a knife. I remember trying to defend myself like this with my hands, and that's where I got the cuts on my hands.
And Jason described pushing them back towards the wall of the bedroom. That information was corroborated by blood smear on the drywall.
He went on to explain the situation thoroughly.
As I ran through here and got the door open, I just ran. I didn't even stop in here. I ran down through here, down the stairs, and I saw a figure come from behind this little cabana here and kneel down in between one of these bushes here on the other side of the pool. And it was kind of like somebody going walking like this.
Jason then described how he came to be at the convenience store.
I got behind the car, started yelling even more. They didn't even stop. I remember going just right next to these bushes. I remember yelling right about this point right here. And when I got to the door here, I looked inside, noticed the clerk. I got to hear and told him to get help.
The cops were starting to believe his story, but they weren't completely sold yet.
The walkthrough was he felt like he was being pursued, and you kind of started to understand how and why he made it all the way to the 24-hour convenience store before he could summon help.
Just as investigators struggled to make sense of Jason's version of events, they received some unexpected information.
We got a tip a few streets over from the apartment complex that an individual had been involved in some crimes, some thefts, and that led us to an individual named Michael Percival.
Michael lived within just a few miles of Jonia's apartment. Police wasted no time and went to check Michael's trailer. The first thing they noticed there raised immediate suspicion.
When we went into the trailer to talk to him, the carpet cleaner was sitting there next to the living room.
A carpet cleaner might not seem suspicious on its own, but it raised red flags when found in the home of a murder suspect. Investigators began to wonder if it had been used to clean something far more sinister, perhaps even blood. Police discovered Michael's shoes in the house, and they made a shocking discovery.
She kind of elbowed me and showed me the tread, and we were both kind of like, holy cow, this could really be, the shoes.
I saw Captain Hall, and he said, we've got him. He still had the shoes, Kevin. He still had the shoes.
The shoes matched the sole pattern to the prints found at the crime scene. They were identical. This gave investigators new hope that they might be closer to solving the case. They brought Michael in for questioning and sent the shoes for further analysis. During the interrogation, Michael made a surprising confession. He claimed he was only an eyewitness to the crime, not directly involved in it.
When we start questioning him about the homicide, he says that he was involved in the homicide. He says that it was drug-related, that Jason, Amy, and John had owed money to the drug dealer, and the drug dealer went over there to collect the money, and the drug dealer went inside the apartment to collect drug money from them. Michael Percival stayed in the car. The drug dealer was in there for a long period of time, so Michael went in to see what was going on and walked in on the drug dealer stabbing Jonna and Jason.
As promising as it seemed to the police, it would soon turn out to be a letdown.
But it turns out that the shoe was sent to the lab for the purposes of examination, and the wear patterns were completely inconsistent with the wear patterns of the shoe print that was recovered in Jason Amamy's bedroom.
Investigators learned that Michael had a tendency to seek attention and mental issues, which explained why he got involved with the police, and that was all. The drug angle was also eventually dismissed after it was confirmed that neither Jason nor Jonia had any involvement with drugs.
There was nothing to indicate at all that Jason or Jonna were involved in drugs, so it was very inconsistent with what we knew about the victims.
The cops were back to square one, but Jonia's mother and other family members were doing everything they could to seek justice.
I would leave Atlanta and I would drive to Knoxville on my days off work. And I would go around apartment complexes, parking lots, anywhere I could, and put flyers out about Jonna's murder and that it hadn't been solved.
Joan Berry is calling us and every other TV station, blanketing the community, keeping the word out about her daughter, doing all she can, plus working full time.
With the investigation at a standstill, police focused back on Jason. They requested that he undergo a polygraph test, which he consented to. Initially, he remained calm and collected, responding to questions with precision.
Do you know for sure who caused the death of Jonna Berry? No. Did you have prior knowledge that the person who stabbed Johnny would be at your apartment that night? No.
However, things began to shift once the polygrapher started asking direct questions about the murder.
Jason, I want you to listen to me. Yes. I think you're a smart boy, but you did a part on that test. Did I really? You really did. Why do you think you failed the test?
I don't know. I was 100% truthful.
The cops were not prepared for Jason's reaction.
But I've been doing this for a long time, and there's something that you have not told me. Did you stab that girl? No,
I did not stab her at all.
Did you get just angry, perhaps, over something that she said or something that happened there?
Never.
And you just lashed out?
Never.
All I'm trying to determine is the truth.
And I'm
getting my point, Jason, that you haven't told the truth.
Where am I lying then? I have told you the 100% truth. Are you saying I did it?
I'm saying it certainly looks like it.
I don't have anything to do with it. I don't care what that box says. I voluntarily took it. If I had something to hide, why would I take this test? Why would I give DNA? Why would I do this?
Calm down.
I'm getting mad here. I ain't getting
You don't need to get
upset.
mad. Calm down.
I feel like a suspect
Calm
now.
down. Calm down.
What happened next surprised the investigators. Jason had failed the polygraph test. Just when things were beginning to look bleak for Jason, something happened that could hold the key to his guilt, or, as he hoped, his innocence. The results of the DNA testing on the murder weapon and blood from the crime scene had returned.
We end up finding out that Jason Amamy's DNA is there in the apartment, Jonna's DNA is there in the apartment, and then we have a third unknown. So we have an unknown person that was there.
This was huge news, as it confirmed what Jason had said about there being another individual in the house that night. The unknown DNA was from a male, but the police still believed Jason could be involved, as the failed polygraph lingered in their minds. They decided to recheck the results of his polygraph, and they noticed something shocking.
The polygrapher said that he failed the test. When we had two other polygraphers look at the results, they basically said that he passed the test.
The police now had even less evidence pointing to Jason. Ultimately, when the shoe print and partial fingerprint on the knife were not matched to him as well, he was cleared of suspicion completely. With no other suspects, the cops tested the unknown DNA profile against the system, but found no matches. With this, they were out of leads to chase, and slowly, the case appeared to be growing cold. But while the police were struggling to find new avenues to investigate, Jonia's family was doing their best to make a change. When the unknown profile returned no matches, Jonia's parents were distraught. But then they learned that in the state of Tennessee, people arrested for violent crimes did not have their DNA taken to be stored in the system, and soon their pain turned into purpose.
Joan and Mike had been lobbying the legislature for the John and Barry Act to change the DNA laws here in Tennessee, which would allow DNA profiles to be taken from people arrested for violent crimes. The Barrys were able to successfully get that legislation passed.
But while this was a huge victory for the parents, they were still no closer to learning who their daughter's killer could possibly be. In 2007, 3 years after Jonia's murder, there were still no answers. Her family had been on television, offered a reward, and displayed the composite sketch of the suspect on billboards and trucks across the country. The police had received a number of tips, but none of them had ever panned out. Then in April, when nearly all hope seemed lost, the police received a tip that had the potential to change everything.
Someone's driving by, and he just happens to look up at the billboard with that composite sketch, and it rings a bell. It's somebody that looks familiar to him. He calls the sheriff's office. The man said, I know this person. He's actually a friend of mine. His name is Taylor Olson.
They had a name, but they'd received names before that had not led to anything. When they looked up Taylor Lee Olson, they saw that he had a past record that only included minor petty crimes. But when they compared him to the composite sketch, the similarity was striking. They also learned that he lived only 15 minutes away from the crime scene at the time of the murder. The detectives were now beginning to hope that they'd finally found their man, and then they learned something that encouraged them to make their move.
He also had an outstanding warrant for his arrest out of another jurisdiction. We arrested him, asked him about the crime. He said knew nothing about it, remembered seeing something about it on the news back then, but nothing since then. He was asked to voluntarily submit a sample of his DNA, which he did, and then he was transported to jail for the outstanding warrant.
With his DNA now in evidence, they were quick to send it for testing against the unknown sample from the crime scene. The results would take a few months to return, but in September 2007, they finally did, and they were well worth the wait. It was a perfect match. With the DNA match, the detectives were now sure they had their man. All that remained was to bring Taylor in for an interrogation and give him the chance to explain why his DNA was at the crime scene. But as he was being brought in, the detectives made sure he had no idea he was there to be questioned about the murder of Jonia Barry, as they believed it was their best strategy to get a confession.
Do you know why you're here?
Pretty much.
What for?
Guys accused me of breaking into his house and stealing a bunch of steel.
Had you ever heard about the John and Barry homicide case before?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd never seen John and Barry before?
Like, in person?
Yeah.
No, I've never met her.
The detectives had hoped that the mention of Jonia would catch him off guard, but Taylor had seemed calm and denied ever knowing her. So the detectives decided to make a daring revelation.
After I sent your sample off to the TBI lab, they got us a report back. It's a match for your DNA being in John and Barry's apartment.
Is this a joke?
No.
Like, I really don't know anything about it.
Trust me, it's not a joke. Is there any reason that you can explain your blood being in John and Barry's apartment?
My blood was in John and Barry's apartment.
Right.
You serious?
Yeah.
You think I killed someone?
I'm just talking about the evidence, is what I'm talking about.
I've never killed anyone.
So we're here to give you an opportunity.
Okay.
To, tell us what happened, why you were there,
Dude.
and why your blood was there.
I have never been there. I don't know killers. I haven't killed no one. I've never killed anybody. Never.
We have your blood there.
So I'm pretty much, huh?
And giving you the opportunity to explain.
I don't have an explanation.
What happened?
After hearing about the DNA, and as reality began to dawn upon him, Taylor seemed to get visibly flustered. However, in that first interview, he stuck to his story and pretended he didn't know anything. But over the next 3 days, the detectives would continue to interrogate him, and slowly, cracks began to appear in his facade. As the interrogations progressed, Taylor found a new way to excuse his DNA being there, complete denial of any memory of the event at all.
Why don't you tell me what happened when you were inside?
I don't know.
You do know, Taylor.
Well, obviously, I killed some person.
How come?
I don't know.
Were they awake?
Well, nothing. I don't know. I don't have a clue. I don't remember. I don't know.
Then eventually, after 3 days of this, The detectives had had enough. They decided to try and put some serious pressure on him and see if he'd crack.
Taylor, I've been sitting out here in the hallway listening to this you're talking about, and I'm just about sick of it. You know what happened to this girl? Look at this. You were there. You know what happened to her? We know you were there. The evidence shows you were there. Why did you do this to this girl? Huh? Why'd you do that?
Seeing the crime scene photos had done the trick, Taylor couldn't face the sheer horror of his act. He finally broke down and began sharing his own account of the night of the murder.
Me and Noah went out and jacked a CD player out of a car, and we kind of got lost from each other, and someone came out when we were breaking into cars and yelled at us, ran off. I didn't know where the hell he was.
The mention of his friend Noah Cox made the detectives' ears stand up. They wondered if Taylor was trying to shift blame onto someone else, but it seemed that this wasn't the case. Next, he'd explain how he'd ended up inside the apartment.
How'd you get into the apartment? Just checking doors? You found that door open?
Yeah. I was just looking for a set of keys with, a little alarm thing on them so I could just beep, beep, find the car, go home.
And then what?
I went in the bedroom and someone said, "Who are you?" or "What are you doing?" or something. And I was like, chill out. And then I just heard like a yell.
But what he'd say next would reveal the true horror of what had unfolded that night.
Just felt the pain.
Where'd you feel the pain at? Right there? Then what happened?
I freaked out. And I don't know. And I can't believe this happened.
You got the knife away from that person and just went kind of crazy?
Yeah. I guess they were sleeping with it. I just freaked out. And I ran.
Taylor said Jonia had tried to stab him, and he'd retaliated in a frenzied rage, but he still made no mention of Jason. What he'd say next would leave them floored.
I didn't even remember anything about the guy until the news said it was 2 people. I didn't realize everyone got hurt like that.
Did you just go in there and things just went wrong?
I really don't know her, man. I've never met her.
It was clear now that the murder had not been premeditated, but was a robbery that had turned into a bloodbath. Finally, after 3 grueling days of interrogation, they had their confession. Before charging Taylor, the detectives gave him the chance to come clean to his own family.
Would you rather talk to your mom on the telephone, or would you rather talk to her in person?
I'd like to see her.
A few hours later, his mother and sister would make their way into the interrogation room, not knowing the heartbreak that awaited them.
What happened, Tay? The truth. Taylor, I love you.
It was an accident.
Are you sure, Taylor? Taylor, I need to know. It's okay. I want to know the truth, okay?
I can tell you.
Okay.
Taylor's mother was visibly shaken to learn her son was a wanted murderer. At first, she seemed to be searching for some way to disprove it.
When did you tell him the truth? How did that come about?
I got my blood's on the knife, and my blood's like in
Then
the
why did
back
they
door.
let you go? Did they get the DNA back? Okay, and it matches? Taylor, okay. Listen, I'm going to help you. I want to make sure that this is for real and that you did it. No, I don't know.
But then, as the truth began to set in, her distress became evident, and she looked to give her son a message of hope.
Taylor, I want you to know something. I want you to start praying because there is a God. Do you hear? And He loves you and will forgive if this is true.
I'm so sorry, Mom.
Taylor.
After he came clean to his family, Taylor Lee Olson was arrested for the murder of Jonia Berry and the attack on Jason Amami. But before he was taken away, he was faced by the press, and his reaction to their questions made the truth of the matter clear for all to see.
Did you mean to kill her? Why did you do it? Was it an accident? But you stabbed her 26 times.
With Taylor arrested and in jail awaiting trial, the justice and closure Jonia's friends and family had been longing for seemed to be near at hand. But then, soon before the trial was set to start, Taylor did something that shook the lives of everyone involved in the case.
I received a phone call from Brad the detective, Jonah, he said Taylor also committed suicide last night. He hung himself in his jail cell.
However, in his final note, Taylor had once again tried to argue his innocence and pin the blame on someone the investigators had heard of before. In his note, he blamed Noah Cox, the friend with whom he'd been trying to steal a car on the night of the murder. But when the cops looked into Noah, he willingly provided a DNA sample, and no evidence was found that could link him to the murder. He was cleared of all suspicion, and with that, the case came to its final conclusion. For Jonia's family, Taylor's manner of death was all they needed to know about whether he was guilty or not.
I read a bunch of letters, said I didn't do it, and hung himself. That's a coward's admission of
दोस्तों क्या हाल है आपकी जिंदगी कैसी चल रही है बंद हो जाएगी अभी बंद हो जाएगी क्या हाल है जिंदगी कैसी चल रही है आपकी क्या जिंदगी में जो गुजर रही हैं बातें चल रही हैं ये मुझे बताइएगा क्या बातें चल रही हैं क्या ज़िंदगी चल रही है मुझे ज़रूर बताइएगा। और मैं आज बैठा हूँ आपकी बातें सुनने। मैसेज ज़रूर किया करें, मैसेज की
तो दे रहा हूँ पानी एहतियात से इस्तेमाल करिएगा तो रात तक देगा सही करेगा।
ये
पहले बता रहा हूँ खुला खुला छोड़ देगा तो फिर
इसमें क्या मसला क्या हो गया सलमान?
बैरिंग का
बैरिंग का। अच्छा कैसे हाल हैं, कैसी ज़िंदगी है, क्या कर रहे हैं? वीडियो अच्छी लग रही है, पता नहीं लगी लग रही है मेरे हिसाब से तो वीडियो आपको पता नहीं कैसी लगे कैसी नहीं लगे। बस यार बताइएगा कुछ अपने बारे में, बताइएगा क्या कर रहे हैं क्या नहीं कर रहे हैं। इंफॉर्मेशन ज़रूर दीजिएगा, इंफॉर्मेशन थोड़ी बहुत होनी चाहिए। कैसी ज़िंदगी लाइफ गुजर रही है, कमेंट ज़रूर किया करें। कमेंट्स से बहुत अच्छा रहता है कि आप लोग कमेंट्स करते हैं और कमेंट से फ़ायदा भी रहता है, अच्छा भी रहता है कमेंट्स करने से। तो कमेंट ज़रूर किया करें और कमेंट्स करके मुझे बताया करें कि कैसे आपका वक्त गुजर रहा है। वक्त गुजरने की तफसीलात बताया करें दोस्तों, वक्त गुजर रहा है कैसा, तफसीलात ज़रूर बताया करें कैसा वक्त गुजर रहा है, तफसीलात क्या हैं, गुजरने की तफसीलात मुझे ज़रूर गाइड किया करें, गाइडलाइन ज़रूर बताया करें। ठीक है दोस्तों, चलो हम लोग यार बस ऐसी वीडियो बना रहे थे, मैंने कहा चलो ऐसी वीडियो बना लेते हैं और ये वीडियो बन गई है।